Trying to move these slides forward. I hope you can see that sign, that slide. So I'm going to go into the formalized sort of speech, but I'm going to stop along the way. And I do ask that if everybody cared to, if they felt like it, let's leave this a little bit loose, because I think in thought leadership forums like this, asking questions is probably more important than the speech itself. Asking anything that comes to mind, I will stop and we can talk about it. We won't make this 4 hours, but I've got to kind of keep it around to a half hour. But I do encourage anybody that wants to talk about it, please do. So this is not going to be a half-hour talk about what has already been done in the way of shopper marketing and in the way of shopper marketing creative development. That's already been done. We're talking about new thing. What this is about is a talk that I think we should be having in terms of moving things forward in the area of shopper marketing. And let's stop kind of, I think, at this point, thinking about what the tactics are, because we know what the tactics are and have been. I think it's about the ideas that kind of drive those tactics. It's time, I believe, to aggressively expand creative boundaries for shopper marketing. We'd all have to agree, all of us that sort of have been thinking about shopper for a long time, we all have to agree that shopper strategy is strong and getting stronger every day. Strategies are really brilliant. We've been lucky enough just recently to not only have just a sensational creative staff working on shopper, but in our strategy area, we just brought on Jim Lucas, and he's sort of one of the guys that wrote the book on shopper strategies, and we're really lucky to have him. But I also think that we all have to agree that the creative expression of shopper strategy has to evolve as fast as the strategy itself. And we have to do it at a rapid rate. We really have to start moving on it quickly. And the reason why I say that is, and again, I've been spending a lot of time with our clients, they're there already. Our clients, I believe, not only are there and they're expecting it from their agencies, because let's face it, there are sales that have to be made continually. And the sales are very important to the health of the brands. And that shopper marketing is directly associated with sales, and that they believe that, and they're looking forward to that, and the agencies just have to move a lot faster around it. So I get back to the speech. It's got to move at a rapid rate, because right now it's a science. It's basically a science-led discipline, and the communication coming off of that discipline is really what creates the relationships, long-term, short-term, whether people buy one time, come back twice, 3 times, whether there's a loyalty factor. That relationship has to be made through the creative expression. The science to creative ratio must be much more balanced, and that's why I'm speaking today. We're not going to look at a lot of work that has already been done. We're going to leave that for the award shows. I'm not going to talk about the science of shopper. It can easily speak for itself. What I am going to talk about, and what I'm going to use my time thinking about, is the art of shopper marketing. I believe that the renaissance of sorts in shopper marketing is about to begin, really a true renaissance. As a little side conversation very quickly, there's a lot of talk about the Mayan calendar and it's the end of everything. The one interpretation that I heard is it's the end of the old and it's the beginning of a brand new and more exciting new. I tend to want to think of it that way, and I tend to think that if you do think of it that way, this is the time to make stronger moves forward. So I've talked to you about the art and science of shopper. I think it's got to become far more impactful. Let me move forward. I believe the Renaissance, I told you that I think the Renaissance is starting. I think it's already begun in Asia. And I'm going to talk a lot more about Asia, but I do think that this Renaissance is emerging, as I see it, in Singapore, in Hong Kong. I see it all over. Burma is now starting to show itself as a marketing capital because it has to. Cambodia is doing it. We're seeing some very interesting things. And when we talk about shelves there and how you sell off the shelf and how you inform marketing communications from the shelf out, you have to start to think about those countries and what they're doing. And then we have to stop, we really have to stop talking about it, and we actually have to have the courage to do it. And that's one of the things that I was inspired with yesterday in the meetings, is that it's courage. You can't keep talking about it. You can't keep wishing for it. You can't keep testing it. I think we keep trying to put our hands around it, and we create small tests. But I think we're at the point where let's just do it, and we can do it in Asia. It's a willing body of participants in the consumer and shopper area, and they are excited and interested in almost anything that a brand does. Let's begin by focusing on what's always been the most forceful and controlling factor of creativity. This is the thing that I really want to talk about, and it's this. It's the line. This is what has kept us and still keeps us in its place. I'm talking about creativity. Now, when I talk about the line, and this is what I was going to frame up, we used to call it above and below the line. It's not so much that anymore. I think we've broken through that. I think we've blurred that. But the line still exists sort of in models that kind of compete for marketing dollars. I also think it sort of separates what we used to call sort of emotional marketing communications from rational or behavioral marketing communications. Somehow there was a line drawn around all of that. And what I think I'm wanting us to focus on now is the pure and final and total obliteration of that line. There's only one line that we really should be thinking about, and that's the borders of countries, and I'll get to that in a minute, especially in Asia. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else calling it Asia. If you ask people that live in that area, they will tell you that they are not Asians, that they are from the countries that they are from, and they have their own sensibilities about that. It's like saying all Europeans are Europeans. That's not exactly true. The French would argue with that. The English would argue with that. It's true in Asia too. So the only line that I think that we have that we should be focused on are those border lines around countries, not around what we do and how we think and who is the lead and who isn't the lead. I think that the line that we're looking at has come very close to dismantling creativity of the marketing communications industry on a global basis. It's an industry that I think everybody on the phone cares about. This line has divided us into what is considered bright communications and what is considered dull. Some that are above that line, some that are below that line seem to have accepted their place in the world, and that's got to stop. It's created a caste system for creativity, and at times at odds with one another. We unknowingly at first created the categorization into two areas. One group was allowed to live and flourish above the line. One had to be content to stay below. We gave one group the power to decide what is valuable and emotional in creativity, and we asked the other group to only focus on what was necessary and rational and some would say behavioral. The line, this line, it has done a great deal to diminish effective communication. For the past 50 years, we've allowed that line to create a second-class Tier 2 level of creativity. And what I am saying is for a shopper renaissance to begin today, we must mark the end of the line. And that's lines that we have put on ourselves, and that's lines that we put around our work, and that's lines between ourselves and the clients. We have to obliterate the line and remember that what we're doing is communicating with people. It's about relationships. And the line actually stops us from having really strong and really ongoing relationships because in our own industry, we've accepted that that line exists and you can't go over it. And again, it was that line that got totally destroyed yesterday with the idea of courage. It's not about necessarily who's the smartest, as the client said. It's about who's the most courageous. And I really got turned on by that. Let me click forward. For the Renaissance to accelerate, and especially in a place like Asia, the marriage of the shopper's art and science it's got to pick up speed and travel far beyond where we are today. I mean, far beyond. And today we are much farther along than we were just 5 years ago. But we want to accelerate, we have to accelerate that, because the industry will lose its relevance if we don't do that. We have to accelerate. We have to do it. There's been way too much talk. I think way too much talk and not enough action for far too long about doing something about the line. That line has been between the work that goes to the mass and all other hardworking but rarely exciting forms of communication. Usually those forms of communication are embraced because of its ability to merely satisfy an individual's need to know. Well, we know we need to know, but we need much more. We need to know that the brand understands us too. And that's whether we're in the shopping aisles, out on the sidewalk, or in front of television, or in front of the computer. It really doesn't matter. We need to know, as consumers and shoppers, that the brand knows us and knows us well. The line. Okay, there's been so much talk about it with nothing done about it, and it has to become an acceptable but spineless cliche. This line above and below. Let's forget about it. It's done. Not much has been changed to forward the art and science of marketing communications. The line is still firmly implanted, but it is starting to fade. I will say that, and it's fading faster than it did before. There's still a massive barrier between a passive be-something message around what the brand stands for and a do-something call to action message. I think a lot more of that has to happen. And it can't be cliche calls to action. They've got to really be actionable. Because we're finding out that the market, especially in parts of Asia, really wants to be interacting with brands in ways that they never did before. And they don't do it right here in the United States. Starting to, but not the way they're doing it in Asia. There's still mass arrogance within the Marcom creative ranks that dictates what builds bonds with people and what doesn't. What can and can't affect behavior. What is and isn't motivating. The line that we talked about is what makes a consumer and what makes a shopper. And which one deserves the really good creative, the really good stuff. And again, that's been talked about by every one of our clients. They want good in every area. In fact, they want great in every area. Yes, there's been a lot of talk, but as far as I'm concerned, the talk's over. Our clients are growing impatient with too much talk and not enough action, action being the operative word. They are impatient with the level of impact coming from our creative content. Asia is the place where we can do more than hold the line. We can completely reposition it. And we can define how to approach creativity and messaging like it has never been defined before. For the rest of the time that I have talking to you, which I know I'm starting to use up probably more than I should, I would like to point out 5 real, tangible, actionable areas where the new Tier 1 creativity can start shopper-driven creative renaissance. 5 areas that represent rich creative territory in Asia, where we can all take on in order to change the entire shopper marketing world. So these are the 5 areas that I've started to talk about. The first area is what kind of creative goes to an Asian shopper, and under what line does a creative shop? Are they above the line? Are they below the line? It's really very, very hard to assign them to any side of the line because they're all over the place in terms of wanting to know more about the brand. First question we have to ask ourselves is, do they live under a line? And if they do, under what line do they live? Now here's an interesting quote that I got in in a conference in Singapore. It was from an agency. And they said 87% of Asian shoppers are generally seeking advice and information on some level, including those open to being approachable. Those are one of those sort of wow numbers that we talk about at the agency. But when you dig down deep into it, it really doesn't mean that much if you think about it. This is not a shopper insight that will change the course of creativity. It will not lead to content that will move an individual to buy. Is there anything in this kind of number of 87% that leads to compelling creative? Is there anything in there? I don't think so, and we had a huge debate in Singapore about this. This information is guaranteed to fail to stimulate any kind of creative thinking in two ways. You could take the word Asian out and replace it with European, Italian, Brazilian, or Scottish, and it would be the same bland statement. Because it's sort of pompous and it sounds self-important, it will no doubt force the creation of weak executional mush we've kind of all seen and done a million times before. And the second point is it becomes what will seem to be rational shopper strategy. And rational creative is a very distant second place. So we don't need bland strategy to drive bland creative. Agencies are placing these weak sort of commoditized discoveries, and I'm talking to the agencies, not so much the clients. Agencies are placing these weak sort of commoditized discoveries into what should be highly creative departments. And we wonder why we get commoditized creative communications out of it. We also wonder why our clients are getting impatient. So here's a few things that we got to think about. There is no single Asian shopper because there is no single Asia. Every country is diverse and not easily defined. So I think that if you want to start testing some creative elements and some creative thinking, especially in Asia, I think you have to quickly understand that they're very, very diverse and they will not easily be defined for you. You'll have to work very hard and ask lots of questions to get the definitions. The second area is that every country has shown incredible resiliency. They have started and stopped and started over again, over and over again, and they have done well. So they are resilient and they are strong in each one of their countries. Every country has its own ambitions. It's not necessarily an Asian ambition, it's a countrywide ambition. And they're very proud of their ambitions. Every country loves to create its own pop culture. Yes, they're still interested in North American pop culture, and yes, they're interested in European, but they have their own pop culture, and pop culture often fits nicely into marketing communications. Every country localizes global brands. They do localize global brands. And what's starting to happen now is many global brands are starting in those countries where they're most relevant and asking other countries to localize what those Asian countries are doing. There's a couple of cases in point with very large clients that have moved their operations to Asia because that's where the action is, and they're asking the other countries to sort of localize what they're doing. Every country embraces convenience, so I think it's not like that's just something that happens in the United States, but convenience is defined by countries. And finally, every country is driven to success on its own terms, so you have to understand what those terms are. I'm sorry, I thought I was on the last one, but I'm not. Every country appreciates flexibility. So when you start to look at that line that sort of separates us, keeps us in our place, you can start to see that that line actually gets in the way. Hang on one second. We're on a timer on the lights, and they shut themselves off. What what we need to do is, it's true for all countries within what we call Asia, we need to consider them carefully as individuals. It's also very true for shoppers of these countries. They are individuals too, and we need to treat them as individuals. So this gets back to being courageous and really starting to form real relationships with our marketing communications. One of the things we talked a great deal about yesterday is that the people sitting in the room aren't people that create ads, and they're not people that create shopper marketing communications. These are people, we got to remind ourselves over and over again that we are creating through our work relationships with individuals. That's what we do through our work. We have to expect highly gifted and creative individuals who embrace this idea of shopper marketing as a emotional form of marketing communications, not just rational. We have to go to work on creating something brilliant without traditional limitations, no lines, not for any of us. What we'll get out of it is something we might have to tame, but wouldn't that be far more progressive than receiving creative that really doesn't do much? I won't stand for it. None of our creative teams are going to be able to get away with it. We are beginning to and doing more and more pushing beyond limits, because I'd rather, and we've said this, it's a cliche, I'd rather pull it back than push it out. We can't do that, and we got to expect that from all of us. Our job as creatives should not be easy. It should be incredibly hard. We should be creating, and the operative word is creating, new content to help our clients sell more of their products and services on a daily basis. There's nothing easy about the act of creation. It's just not easy. It is creativity and results, not old creativity and past results, but very fresh, relevant, creative, and ongoing results that will give our agencies value to our clients. That creativity and that bravery will be much more valuable to our clients and to the people that they serve than us just doing things that are safe. And we know it, and we talk about it, but it's time to dip into that pool in a bigger way. The creative mind must push itself far beyond any shopper solutions that already exist. The line that divides what has always worked before from the creative bravery of exploring new areas and expression, yes, that line must be removed between passive and aggressive, between what always worked and what we're not sure will work, but we think it will work. We have to start moving into those areas. Sidestepping risky thinking driven toward the individual is the greatest risk of all. When should shopper insights drive the brief? Let me move forward on these slides. I'm going to get to. Here's an area that we've been working on for a long time, and I think all of us have to work on it. When should shopper insights drive the brief? The way the briefing for shopper marketing normally takes place, or has normally taken place, it is that it's the brand brief that's done first. We talked about this again yesterday. The brand team develops a creative idea guided by a consumer insight. That was the old way we did it, in a good way, but it was the old way. Once that's complete, the shopper teams are brought in. It is getting better, but it still pretty much works like this. So the shopper behavior is considered sometime after the consumer insights have been studied in depth under a microscope. Sometime after the shopper is considered, individualized retailers are then considered. Wait a minute, hang on, this is fresh off the presses. Adam has said, Lor, can you give us an example or two that differentiates between your idea of the art and science of shopper marketing? That differentiates. Yeah, I can. Let me get through this and I'll get there. I will get there in a second. And it's a good question. Let me just finish this little segment and I'll get there. The shopper behavior is considered sometime after the consumer insights. And as these important constituents are considered in a linear hierarchy from top to bottom, or above or below, shopper creative gets developed, usually in an adaptive way, which is not the most creative way. In Asia, a far more creative direction for developing the brief is at hand. Now let me get back to Adam here. An example or two that differentiates between your idea of the art and science of shopper marketing. Yes, the science of shopper marketing used to be how do you grab some attention at the shelf, and it was usually tactical, very tactical. It was a floor, if you mentioned shopper marketing to anybody, it would be a floor decal or it'd be a shelf talker, and that was the palette that you could play with. An example that I would point out would be, and I hope this answers your question, Adam. An example that I would point out is, for example, Coors beer. Scientifically, you would be able to prove that Coors beer is no colder than any other beer, and that their advertising emotionally has tried to own cold for a long time. When they came out with a beer can that actually showed cold, 75% of consumers of beer now believe in the United States, 75%, this is one of those wow numbers, 75% believe that Coors beer is colder than any other beer. They believe it. They believe it because Coors set out to own it. And they owned it at the shelf, not in advertising. The train or the Rocky Mountains or anything else that Coors did sort of said they wanted to get credit for it. But the packaging owned it. The packaging owned it. And that could be a very rational, scientific thing. But it turned out that the packaging, which usually is the thing that doesn't get the most credit, drove the idea more than anything else. So I hope that answers your question. I'll go back to it. Man, I'm getting lots of good questions here. Let me move forward a little bit because I don't want to lose time. And then I'm going to come back to you, Gustavo. I'm going to do that from Colombia. It's really terrific. If brands had no marketing, inside out versus outside in thinking, or what we like to refer to as shelf back or shelf out or whatever. If brands had no marketing communication budgets, and I just used the Coors example, if brands had no marketing communications budgets at all, if all of a sudden all marketing communications dollars disappeared, the package would still have to be developed. It serves patiently, really patiently, gets a lot of abuse too, as the closest point closest point you can get to the brand. It actually defines the brand, and the only point that stands between the brand and the hand of the shopper. The creativity should be designed and built in to attract, interact, and act with the shopper, all on that piece of packaging. The amount of brand strategy that goes into package design is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. The color palette defines the brand, the font defines the brand, the iconography defines the brand, the hierarchy of message defines the brand. If the packaging is truly tier one in design, it can touch every emotion. It can stimulate the sense of touch, it can heighten anticipation, and yet those creative entities that feel entitled to sit above that line often ignore the amount of brand decisions that have gone into creating the sheath and maybe the small eighth of an inch packaging that has gone into creating the sheath that the brand lives in. And so when I show you this funnel, what we need to do before we do our creative is not in a linear approach, top to bottom, brand down to shopper. But we think you need insights that go all the way at the top. They're all equal. You need a consumer, a retailer, and a shopper insight going into the development of it. Because then the packaging that is usually sitting there 18 months before any advertising gets started, maybe even more, can actually inform other forms of marketing communication, which was a no-no. We can do that in Asia, probably faster than we can do it in the United States. But we have to start doing it all over the world. Now let me take a breath. I'll take a little breath, and I'll get to Gustavo here. And I know I'm probably doing this way different than any other person has done one of these things. I apologize, but I have to do it this way because I think I'm going in 15 directions at the same time. Let me talk to Gustavo. Hello, Gustavo, who's from Bogota. The Hispanic market is one that is going to grow. That is true. Increasing shopping. Let me read this. Increasing shopping this American brand because We have our brands, even Latin American. They advised us to drive expansion with brand Colombia as Sofia in the USA. You know this brand of clothing for American and Latino women in Kmart. Well, if I stood up, you would probably see that I don't know clothing too well. I am not a fashionista, but I'm sure that many of us do know that, and I should know that. Um, and you're right. The Hispanic market has long been ignored. It's been Asia, it's been Europe, it's been North America. We are very aggressive as participants in moving into the area. It is a close, it's in close proximity to us, and we're very, very interested in what's going on there. And I unfortunately, I don't know the brand that you point out. I have to be transparent with you. But is there something that you're interested in us thinking about or moving forward with? If there is, then you need to get a hold of us, and we will start thinking about it, and we will get the right people to think about it. We'll apply some of our thinking in terms of how to go at it, but at some point, let's get together and talk about it a little bit more. I'm open for that. All right, let me move on to the next slide because I know everybody is probably getting a little bit hungry and they got to eat their lunches and other things. So, I wanted to say, and I'm going to kind of cut through this stuff here. This, everybody would agree, is a package, and that's an old photo that before the iPhone 5 came out, this was the packaging. I think we would have to agree that Apple, like everything they do, is all about design, and even their packaging has set up anticipation. It's like getting a gift. And even in small retailers, you can use that packaging very, very well as point of purchase, and it gets attention. It's smart packaging. It informs their marketing communications all the way back. If you see their television commercials, it is very much like the way their packaging works, not vice versa. This obviously is packaging. This we know is packaging. And this was sort of breakthrough packaging. But what we don't start to think about is what else can be considered a package and how do we address that? A car body is a package to the car. It contains everything that's inside that car. There are design components within that car that was very well thought out that we'd be crazy to ignore in all of our marketing communications. There are design components within that. Why do we think that the car is separate from the marketing communication? We should, in our marketing, that car body and design within it can inform all marketing communications from that car out. So before you even get to the dealership, you're experiencing design components. I'm not talking about the way the interior looks. I'm talking about detail within the interior, detail in the chrome, detail that becomes a design component that we start to build highly branded communications that eventually gets you right face to face with that car. And when you see it, you'll recognize it in the communications you just saw. This is for you, Gustavo. Clothing is packaging. It packages somebody's body. Clothing says a lot about you. There are design elements within that clothing that we should pick up on all forms of marketing communication. Not just a picture of the clothes, but the stitch of the sweater, or the small Levi tag in red that they've been doing so well with. That should inform marketing communications. Shoes, obviously, can be considered packaged, and there's design elements in that. And if we start to build those design elements in our marketing communications, your connection, when you do get to whatever that shelf is, your connections will already have been made. You've seen those design elements all the way from the shelf all the way back out again. So the connection is highly branded and very strong. Now, I do want to talk about this for just a second. Let me see here. In-store and online. There are only two places where you can sell your product. there's only two places. There's only two places where you will part with your money. That is in a store or on a sidewalk. And Gustavo, thank you for your comment. I like your follow-up comment too. We'll talk about that later too. The second is online. Those are the only two places where you will part with your money. And if you part with your money, then, and we believe that that's a very important thing to do, and you have to give good reasons for parting with that money, then we feel that all forms of marketing communications should drive you to those 2 points. It's pretty simple. So I don't think there's a whole lot of argument, but creativity starts to rethink itself if it knows where it's driving you, and it's in store and online. We've all seen these pictures. It's a very complicated world we got to deal with. We've seen it a million times before. Sometimes they're on shelves, real shelves. This is an example of a shelf that is a virtual shelf, and I think you've seen this example. It's pretty terrific. A lot of people don't know this, but a cruise ship is a mall. We could start to help cruise ships on guiding people on how to shop on that ship. This is a mall now. If you look at baseball, football, soccer fields, they're really malls with games in the middle of them. And you have to go back into any one of those situations, whether it's entertainment, whether it's sports, whether it's travel, and you have to start thinking about the basic rules of attract, interact, and act, and apply those rules in very creative ways in those very creative environments. The last thing I wanted to show you is this. This is a for sale sign. It's probably the most basic form of communications that has ever been made, and not much has been done with that. But when you think about it, and I just leave you with this thought, that is probably sitting in front of the most expensive purchase you can make, that. And I think it would be terrific to start thinking about that in a far more impactful way on how to use that sign to, from the shelf out, shelf being the street that house is in front of, how to make marketing communications far more important when you start moving towards that purchase. Finally, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me your time. I know I've sort of poured a whole lot of information in a very short period of time. And Gustavo, to you, why don't you give me a call sometime, okay? And then we don't have to use these kinds of notes. Are there any other questions? Okay, let's see. How do you recommend convincing the client to have courage? This is from Jose Francisco from the United States. How do you recommend convincing the client to have courage? Really, really good question. Really, really good question. Well, first of all, I think that we have to have some courage in our conviction. And I think that when we do very creative marketing communications, we have to go in feeling like we have thought it all through. I think that you have to have a very close one-on-one relationship with your client. So if your client isn't in that space, you got to work very hard to get into that space where there's a trust bond, where they believe that you are thinking about their needs as much as they think about their needs. So it's not so much convincing them, it's more arriving at the same conclusion at the same time. So, sometimes you could do it in a pitch. You can sell something in a pitch, but not always. I think it's all in relationship, and it's respect for having some form of courage together. And sometimes that may mean that the agency has to, if you really believe in something, you have to maybe even be a financial partner in that. And those are the things that start to convince the client in a different way. So that's the best I can answer you on that question. Any other questions? Let's see. Here we got Doreen. What comes first, design or marketing communications? I believe design does, Doreen. I think design should inform marketing communications. And by the way, that wasn't always my point of view. I'm pretty, I came from a far more integrated marketing communications background for a very long time. And now I have come to believe, because I'm so close to design now, I've come to believe that design is pretty much, if you look at what came first, the chicken or the egg, I'm saying design is the chicken. There you go on that one, Doreen. From Switzerland, by the way. Thank you for calling me or writing to me. Great answer. Thanks, thanks, Doreen. Doreen said great answer. I have a feeling Doreen's a designer. Anybody else? Anybody else? I'm wide open here. If nobody else, go have a sandwich, but I'll take anything. Gustavo, why don't you send me your number so we can get in touch with each other, all right? Anybody? Well, then I'm going to sign it off. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Danielle from Amsterdam, thank you for this session. About the for sale sign, I've been thinking about that as well. Many better options are out there. Let's put that in the market. Like to talk to you about that one. All right, no problem. Thank you, Danielle. Oh, let's see, from Amsterdam. And indeed, design is very, very underestimated. Guy from Canada said, bon appetit. Thank you, Guy. Anybody else? Anybody else want to wish me a bon appetit? All right. Okay, then we're going to sign off. Last moment. I'll see you all later. Oh, wait a minute. One more came in. Thank you, everyone. Oh, okay, that's from BrandSquare. Oh, wait a minute. They're coming in. Thank you from Kosovo. Wow, man. Thank you. All right. So great presentation. We'll talk to you a little bit later. The recording will be distributed via email. Look out for this tomorrow. Let's see. Rachel. Oh, Rachel from Australia. Thank you from Australia. Thank you, Rachel. I'll be in Sydney not too long from now. Anybody else? That's it. Talk to y'all later.